Hi guys, welcome to the second episode of Turning Point Live. It's great to again see everyone here, and this is an interactive broadcast. So if you're watching from home, drop us a comment, let us know where you're watching from in the UK, and if you have any questions or topic ideas for us to discuss this week.
So on today's podcast, we're going to discuss Trump, Brexit, Boris, and lockdowns, hopefully. So let's start with the obvious one, which is Boris not turning round on Brexit and going forward with no-deal Brexit. What are your thoughts, Jack?
No, I think it's great. I think Boris managed to pull through for us because there are a lot of people who were pushing him to go for a deal which would restrict Britain or to completely sell out, such as build a border in the Irish Sea. And I think Boris, again, hopefully these words won't haunt me, but I think he does have Britain's best interests at heart. It's good he's not sold out of fishermen and he's not sold out Northern Ireland. And I think, again, by going down this no-deal approach, we're really putting our money where our mouth is, and we're going to watch the EU suffer, really, and they'll have to come and get a good deal with us. What's your opinion on it?
I think the main thing from what Boris has done is he's put the ball in the EU's court. So basically, it's down to them. If they want a deal, Boris knows, or the EU know that we're happy to negotiate. We also have to leave the table, which in any negotiation in any walk of life, you need to be prepared to leave the table. And I think with Theresa May, and especially with Theresa May, the EU knew that we were never going to leave the table. We were never going to do it. Theresa May really didn't want no deal, despite all her rhetoric. She was never going to do it. And I think that I think the EU know we're serious. And also, I think that with the European Union, they do have a tendency, as we experienced only a few months back, to actually come right at the end and come back to the table and negotiate in the 11th hour. So some people are saying that the chances of a deal are incredibly slim. I think they're slim, but I still think that there's a big chance that we could come out of these negotiations with a deal.
Oh, definitely. I think I saw one of the comments there talking about some Biden news recently. And actually, as much as we'd like to discuss the Biden news, we'd like keeping our channels online and not censored by Twitter. But I think everyone knows what's going on there, and the media haven't been able to censor this story. But no, back to Boris. I think someone's got a comment there. Boris should turn Britain into a Hong Kong or Singapore. Well, hopefully not Hong Kong, because we don't want China suppressing our democracy, but Singapore of Europe. And that could be great, actually, if we lowered our taxes and we became a business hub for the world. We'd see British jobs go through the roof. We'd see investment in Britain go up, and that could be a very exciting prospect, while at the same time doing that good old Churchill two fingers up at the European Union for the way they've treated us.
I think that the thing about Brexit, and I think most people saw it in the referendum, is it's not the end, it's a means to the end. There's so many different types of Brexit. It's just a way of saying that we're going to take control of our laws, our way of doing things, and we can elect whoever we want to change the direction of this country if we want to. If Labour come out and want a more sort of higher tariffs on goods coming in and that sort of thing to protect British jobs, I may not be in favour, but at least we've got that power now to do that. But a lot of opportunity now with Brexit to take control of our own destiny. And as you said, one of the things we could do is lower tariffs, lower taxes, let goods flow into this country, and basically the EU can do that. All they can do is they could impose tariffs for our goods coming into them. All they're doing there is just blockading themselves. So, and we can just keep the tariffs very low on their goods, and that benefits us hugely.
Oh, definitely. I think a lot of the tariffs in place at the moment are only there to benefit France or Germany anyway. So we can, again, reduce tariffs on certain nations and boost British trade, be able to trade with new partners, and really just carry out the 2016 sort of ideas which led to us voting to be an independent nation.
I think the interesting thing, though, is which I'm not sure whether the direction of this government will be on China. Will this government go and start buying up goods, cheap goods from China, which in the short term could benefit us, but in the long term could do huge damage because of the Chinese regime, because of their dumping, because of their intellectual property theft, and because of all of this, I'm not 100% sure that the government will go on the side of the Chinese government, or will take a more Trumpian approach and say, no, we're not going to trade with this horrible regime.
Yeah, and I think as well, there's the people of Hong Kong to consider as well, because any trade deal we do with China, which doesn't protect their sovereignty, which doesn't reinstate rights for the people of Hong Kong, is a complete betrayal. I believe I think it's the Anglo-Sino agreement that we signed, which said that we would still have Hong Kong's interests at heart, and China's completely walked all over that. They've torn it up, thrown it in the mud, and our government has done relatively nothing except a few angry tweets in their direction. And really, I think we owe the people of Hong Kong more than that, especially as they're British citizens overseas. British nationals overseas, sorry.
Yeah, you're right. I think there's especially China. There's three different parts of China. I think Hong Kong's one of them, where they treat the Hong Kong, and I think we have a lot more invested in Hong Kong than any other country, obviously, because we signed that agreement. So that's the first thing. The second thing is economically how they're trying to destroy the West. Effectively, they're trying to become a superpower. Through the back door, basically. They're ignoring WTO rules, they're stealing intellectual property, and they're lowering the price on a hell of a lot of their goods to way below market value, and then just dumping them all along the West to destroy our own industry. So I think there's a few things there where you're not competing with China properly like you are in a normal free market. And the third thing, obviously, is the horrible thing that's going on with their oppression of Muslims in China, which I think is absolutely atrocious. And I think it needs more recognition in the media. And Majid Nawaz has done fantastically well to get that into Parliament for debate, and Farage as well went along and supported Majid Nawaz on it. But I think there needs to be a hell of a lot more consensus across everyone, just to say, okay, that's a line that we're not going to accept. And I think if that was any other country, then that line would have been made clear to the Chinese. However, because it's China, because we buy so many of their goods, I think there's an element within the government or within the establishment which will say, well, we can.
No, certainly. And I think I had a guest on a podcast a couple of weeks ago, Nick Buckley, and he said actually it's one of those things where because it's a Chinese person persecuting a Chinese person, it doesn't fit their anti-racist narrative as such, because they always like to see sort of Europeans as the aggressors in this, who they like to call racist. And actually, once you have something which doesn't fit the mold, they get confused because they don't want to go and criticize China because they're worried about being called racist for calling out a genocide, which just shows how fickle their ideology is and how little they actually care about real atrocities going on in the world.
If you go back to the 80s, a lot of people point there's a lot of similarities and parallels with the Chinese the Chinese government and the USSR in terms of how we deal with them. Some people are saying it's a new Cold War, which I can see. And if you look at the approach that especially Reagan took as well, there was very little in terms of, trade went down. We stopped trading so much with them, tariffs went up, and that's almost, it was a hardline approach. But it seemed to work, and I think maybe that is the approach we need to go down. We need to be a lot, in my book, we need to be a lot less dependent on China, and more in terms of with our own allies. We have India growing. India's a massive country; it's growing, and India's part of our value system. It's got the common law. It's a fantastic country, and I think that if we sort of trading a bit more with Commonwealth countries and countries that we can trust, like America as well. Even Europe, we've had our problems with them, but they do share our values. Them instead of this horrendous Chinese government, which really is appalling. Then I think we'll be better off, and I think the world will be better off, and we'll be a much safer place as well.
No, certainly. I think it's time Britain remembered its place on the world stage. So hopefully Brexit can lead to Britain retaking our role as an international role model, but also a pastor of justice throughout the world who called out atrocities. Again, this is a chance for us to reinvent ourselves and re-establish ourselves at the table. Because at this stage, again, as part of the European Union, we're one voice amongst many in Europe. But as an independent nation, we can really make a difference in world peace, in human rights, in standing up for British values and British traditions.
Yeah, we work well with the European Union ahead of a lot. We didn't even have a seat there at all, as you said. That there were people who were negotiating and voicing our opinions, who we don't elect or even know their names. Was now going back to Brexit, we have this opportunity where the people that we elect, we decide, we vote out. We can hold them to account a lot more. So Tony Benn made the argument in the 70s and 80s of and Tony Benn was obviously of the left. In the same argument, if you can't hold people to account who make your laws, then you've got absolutely no chance.
Definitely. And is our guest here yet, or has he not arrived?
No, he's not arrived yet.
No worries. Right, well, Karen, I think one of the other things to mention, someone popped it in the comments, is this beheading that's happened in France, which is. Oh, do apologise. Again, this beheading that happened in France, it's completely ridiculous to see the lack of condemnation, but also the fact, I believe Konstantin Xin shared an image of it in the UK where Allah Akbar was trending in the UK. So it shows, unfortunately, there is a sizable amount of either people pretending to be Islamist extremists or Islamist extremists in the UK who are celebrating this horrific attack. And the fact that the left did not want to call it out as being a fear, because they were fearful of it being called Islamophobic. And again, it's not an attack on Muslims. There's plenty of Muslims who are contributing members of society to own their small businesses. They have conservative values, but there is a small minority of them which are extremists. And because of political correctness, people are too scared to call them out. Again, wider than France, one of the reasons the Manchester attack happened was because the police were informed about the target, I believe 2 or 3 times, and they were too scared because of political correctness to actually and arrest the guy, pointed out by several members of the public.
Yeah, I mean, we know what a lot of the liberal left are about. They want diversity on everything other than opinion. This is the way they've always worked. It's the way, and again, it's not all the left, but generally, when we're talking about the liberal left, especially modern woke left, they want all sorts of diversity, but they just cannot stand diversity of opinion. There's also an interesting thing where the Islamic extremists obviously hate our way of life and our country. The other parallel, and I'm not saying the hard left are anywhere near like these people, but they also seem to have a hatred of our way of life as well. So there's an interesting parallel there.
It's one of the, I guess, core things. If you don't like this country, whether you're an extremist, whatever, extremist right, extremist left, extremist religion, why are you here? There's plenty of countries around the world which have extremist values in their government. Go and move to one of those. Stop trying to change Britain to become some sort of extremist, I almost swore they were not allowed to say extremist hole. Why are you trying to change Britain for the worst? Again, lots of people as well, they flee from war-torn countries and they come here and they try and implement the same government which they fled from in the first place. Again, you've got hard leftists. Again, we want to turn Britain into an extreme socialist or communist state. Well, places like that exist. Cuba, Venezuela, go live there. Stop trying to destroy our society and go and live by your principles elsewhere. We don't want you here.
No, but those principles have funny though, because they never want to go there. These people that hold up the flag of the Chinese government I saw one on Twitter the other day, and I really thought it was awful. He said Stalin did more good than harm. That's the most ridiculous thing. If someone was saying about Hitler, and they would be rightly angry, like the Twitter world and we'll be rightly angry. But it seems like, there is this soft spot somewhere on the left, on the British left, also on the American left and European left, with communism and with hardcore leftism, which really has never had a place in our country or countries in Europe. And be it Venezuela or be it Cuba or be it the USSR or China, there's always that little soft spot for them that they find it very hard to criticize them because they feel that they have a moral superiority to us purely because we care about the poor, and they think that that's how simple their arguments are. They think we care about the poor, therefore, and you don't, you're oppressive capitalists, therefore we are better people than you. And it doesn't matter if the system works or not at all. It's all about caring. And if it works, it doesn't matter if it works. Caring. Go ahead.
Definitely. Well, you've got Ash Sarkar, I believe, saying luxury communism. It's such a little, it might work in a kid's storybook or it might work in sort of fantasy land, but in reality you can't have sort of this luxury communism where you get everything without doing any work and all the workers are happy. Someone's clearly providing for you. Also, they don't talk about who's doing that. It's just the ideology is fundamentally flawed, especially when you have things like communism, socialism, where it has never worked in the world. Even in small communities, it's never worked. People can't produce one example in the hundreds of years it's existed where it's worked. But capitalism, while not perfect, is the only ideology which has elevated the masses out of poverty, which has improved the world for a lot of people. It's lifted people, or made it increased class fluidity to move people up from, say, working to middle class, and to bolster people's livelihoods, making it a much better situation for people to live in.
Yeah, and the other thing to say on that is with capitalism, we've sort of found half of a middle ground where it's not ruthless, complete free market, free trade capitalism. You can have a compassionate capitalism, a one nation. I hate to use a phrase. I'm not even talking about this government, but a more of a one nation approach of, capitalism. It does have its flaws, there's no doubt, but no other system devised by mankind produces the wealth that capitalism does, or distributes it better than capitalism. There's absolutely no system. Of course, it's flawed.
And I think, as well, a lot of the flaws of capitalism, people falsely attribute to capitalism as well. It's more corporatism. When you have these big multinationals like Amazon and Google exploiting the people, that's not real capitalism, because there's so many regulations to stop the underdog, the small company, to working reach their level. So they've essentially corporatism is socialism by another form. So instead of the government dictating policy, you have large companies doing that. And that's not about capitalism. It's about low regulation, free markets, encouraging small business. It's not about big corporations having monopolies and using that to phase out the competition.
The other thing, yeah, exactly. And one of the problems we have currently, I think, in this society, I think this is probably the biggest problem, is because of these big corporations, especially on social media, and even sort of Amazon, and even now it's coming into my own shopping. I try and shop, and I can't shop without, LGBTQ propaganda being shoved into my face, or Black Lives Matter being shoved into my face when I'm trying to watch Arsenal. You can't do that anymore. So what happens when you have all these big corporations? What they try and do, which is what they're doing now, is they are putting a moral fabric into our society, which we cannot choose. Because especially with these big monopolies, like, people want to watch Premier League football. People aren't going to stop watching Premier League football, and they know that. So what they're doing, this is one of the problems with corporatist elements of capitalism, which is when you have too many monopolies. What happens is all these huge companies have sort of Black Lives Matter and that type of thing, and people carry on watching them because they really want to watch Premier League football. They have to shop like Sainsbury's, and that. So that's where I think capitalism is a fantastic economical system, but it doesn't have all the moral what's the word? All the things that we need in this society morally to grow.
Especially with the FA Cup and all the players taking the knee. Notice they didn't do it when the stadiums were full of crowds. They waited until lockdown before they started doing this virtue signaling stuff, because the fans would not tolerate that rubbish. And they've really taken advantage of the coronavirus by pushing this political agenda, because they know there's no lashback. More people at home, more people are watching these things compared to normal. The one positive we did see out of lockdown was when Ben and Jerry's went all woke, pro-economic migrants, despite the fact they're not based in the UK, they're based in the States, but they're trying to tell us who we shouldn't admit to our country. At least their sales plummeted. And so it goes back to that old saying, go woke, go broke.
I think our guest is here. So
excellent.
Introduce him.
Yeah, so again, our guest isn't late. It's my fault. I'm in Turkey at the moment, so we're 2 hours ahead. So I told him the wrong time. I told him Turkish time, not UK time. So apologies to Dr. Parag Shah, so a top guy who stood as a Brexit Party MP candidate, and he's also a frontline medical doctor.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for having me, and my apologies as well for the little misunderstanding on time.
That's completely my fault. I do apologise. How are you doing anyway this evening, Doctor?
Very good. I am, like many people in the UK with this lockdown, working on my home. Lots of people are working on their home at the moment. It's difficult to get hold of people who've got the skills to plastering and all that sort of thing. But it's great to see that that the people have those skills still. Fantastic, and that it's hard to get hold of skill sets that are in very high demand at the moment.
Definitely. So tell us, obviously you were on the front line during the coronavirus. Can you tell us a bit about the pandemic? Was it as bad as the media made it out to be? What did you sort of see? Were there any issues with you and the NHS while on the front line? Like, how much did you see of their sort of PC wokeness?
So I have a lot to say about that. I can tell a story or two. I'll start off with the sentiment I had back in February, March time when our Minister of Health, when Matt Hancock went on the podium and called all hands on deck. Can ex-medics, retired doctors, medical students, anybody who's got any medical skills, please come and help out? And I had to respond to that. And was very enthusiastic to do so. What I discovered was an enormous amount of bureaucracy that was in place to recruit all of us. And the amount of time it took them to recruit myself was 54 days. And during that time, I was watching the news and hearing about the challenges that the NHS was going through, that ICUs were going through. At that time, much less was known about COVID. People were dying, and it was very much an unknown entity. Things have changed now. We know a lot more, and far fewer people are dying. In fact, we now know that the vast majority of people actually recover from this virus without any medical intervention at all, which is great. Great to hear that. But back then, when the news was reporting that, thousands of people were dying every day, and it was kind of like being compared to a wartime situation, all hands on deck with COVID. And I have to say that I thought that was wrong.
Yeah, no, it seems nonsensical there. Again, if you're working with adults, or again, why teach you the whole medical course? Again, if you're working with virus patients, surely you just need to brush up on that one thing. If they wanted to apply you to a different department, they would train you in that thing. But if you're already medically trained and licensed, you just really need to brush up on sort of the disease control rather than have to go through the whole training again with all the PC rubbish they're put on there too.
Well, so I know where it comes from. I mean, so I don't know how many of the audience watching this will remember cases like Baby P. I think must have been about 15 years ago. London Borough, an awful story about a little toddler boy who was horribly abused and missed by multiple public services that could have caught this. And there are certain other famous name cases. Tragic, really awful. And there was something that had to be done to tighten up our systems 20 odd years ago. What's happened in that time, though, is that there's this huge focus on safeguarding, which, as I say, was needed back then. But in the more than a decade that's passed, it's gone more and more in the direction of safe, and an enormous amount of bureaucracy that goes with it. And certain things did need addressing. The left-handed needed to talk to the right hand, and that wasn't happening. Different departments were not communicating. But now the pendulum has swung far in the other direction, to the extent where there's so much bureaucracy generated out of all the safeguarding culture that it's becoming obstructive in its own right. And COVID, the coronavirus crisis, is revealing that. And the headline for me is 54 days to deploy me. Really? Mad.
No, it's just a shame. Did you see, again, obviously we hear about London, there's a large crime rate. Did you see sort of a lot of gang victims, or were you solely in sort of the COVID department? What was sort of your role in London at the time?
So, yeah, the department was still open to non-COVID patients, in particular A&E, trauma, things that come in, road accidents, and as you point out, street violence. It was a London-based hospital, and yes, we did see people coming in with wounds and conditions from street violence, and there's a lot more of it than I would like to see, much more than I remember seeing when I was a medical student and working in A&E in years gone by. So things have changed. Knife crime victims were there. It's not a good picture. I've got very key, strong opinions, I think, and insights into where this culture of street violence is coming from. It's multifaceted. There are many, many factors, and whenever you tune into some of the mainstream TV and radio shows that discuss why there is so much knife crime in London, there's a tendency to focus, well, to not talk about certain things that are pertinent. And one of them is the importance of family unit. And it's no secret that 90% plus of the knife crime is amongst young males. And I'm a firm believer that young men need their fathers and their father figures. And we've got this huge problem right now where we have a culture that does not celebrate the need for a father in a household, and most especially for boys, teenage boys. They do need their dads. I stand by that comment.
I agree with you, Doctor, there. I think you've raised what I think is the most important point in talking about knife crime, which is family and father figures. But I think the problem almost is wider with this whole family thing, because we're seeing divorce rates go up generally in crime or not crime. We're seeing divorce rates go up, which has a huge impact on kids. And the law seems to be sway towards the side of divorce as opposed to trying to keep a family together. So, in my opinion, I think that the law needs to be tougher with marriage and be more on the side of the kids and keeping a stable household to raise children. I think that's, for me, and I agree with you, I think that's probably one of the biggest issues of especially these young men who don't have a father figure. They don't have a male person to look up to, someone who can teach them how to, be a gentleman, how to be a man. So they turn to other things. Like crime, because they are young men and they need their fathers. I just want to go quickly back to the COVID thing. I want to quickly ask you your opinions on firstly the first lockdown. Was it necessary? Was it more damaging afterwards? And now, should we have a second lockdown?
Right. I feel that our government is playing catch up. I started feeling that and thinking that. That's important. Feeling and thinking that back in Easter time. I, at that time, was telling all of my network friends and family that they were not rolling out the lockdown correctly, in my opinion. I'm not an epidemiologist, but I am experienced in many different areas, and that breadth of experience is also relevant, sometimes more relevant than the expert who knows a hell of a lot about just one area of life. Sometimes the person that's got a breadth of experience is sharper than the one who's an expert in a narrow area of life. Now, I was saying they needed to obviously protect the most vulnerable, and that was already clear very early on. People who were particularly elderly or overweight or suffered from quite serious illnesses, underlying illnesses, and especially multiple illnesses. Those sets of people needed to be protected, and there's more than one way of doing it, but they can keep themselves self-isolated. There's so many different ways of keeping them aside and safe. and they also needed to take responsibility to keep themselves safe. That section of society is not the majority, not by far. They are very much the minority. And then the rest of society, let's spell out who they are. Young children under 10, teenagers and 20-somethings, and then there's people from 30 to 40, and those between 40 and 60, middle-aged. I would have released those people into the community, encourage them actually to go out into the community and get infected. There, I'll repeat that because it's quite a shocking thing to hear anybody medical saying. If you know that you're young and fit and healthy, and you have good confidence in your immune system, and you're not abusing your body, you're not abusing alcohol, you are getting a good night's sleep, you are fit, you are in fine fettle, and you're in good shape. Those are all very important points. What I said does not apply to the person who's an alcoholic and young, or who's not giving themselves a full night's sleep and is partying hard every night and young. Those people have got run-down immune systems. So assuming people are living their lives responsibly, I would have said the 20-somethings, go out, do your jobs, mix and mingle, and do get infected, provided you fall into that category. And I think the NHS would have been able to easily cope with the few of them that might have actually got serious illness and bring them back to good health. And after that wave, the next would be, after that, I shouldn't use the word wave, it's been used for other purposes. After that batch of human beings, the 30 to 40 somethings, because they're also of working age population, keep the economy going. I would have said a month with the first lot, or perhaps 2 or 3 weeks, and then 2 weeks to a month with the second batch. And after you've got the, say, 18 to 40s out there, I would have said the children, let them go out and mix and mingle. And having got them exposed, infected, and then overcoming the illness, remember, vast majority, around 90%, it varies from country to country, between 85 and 95%, then you've, I'd say, got more than half the population exposed and recovered. And then you can talk to the 50 plus age group and say, you guys go out. I'm talking about the healthy, fit, non-alcoholic, who have good night's rest, who don't abuse their bodies. Go out, take confidence in your immune system, get infected, beat it. You may fall ill at home, nurse yourself, allow your family to nurse you, beat this bug, and then re-enter society. Once we've done all of that, then we can start thinking about estimating what proportion of the population is now immune in that much time, the various tests to identify antibodies in our systems, both the proper test in the lab, which is time consuming and more costly, but also the cheaper tests that are available in home kits, much less reliable. But that we could have got hold of more of those, improved the standard of those, taught people how to use those, and make a better estimate of what the levels of antibodies are in our population. And let me be clear about something. There's all this talk about testing and tests. People need to be aware that there's a test for whether you are carrying the COVID virus in your system. And there's another completely different test, which is whether your immune system has developed antibodies against the virus. These two different tests. And one of the things that I feel our authorities, our government, our health experts are not doing properly, in fact, they're perhaps even being disingenuous, not caring to properly explain to our members of the public what the difference between these two tests are. and if things had been done the way I've just described, at the end, you look at the most vulnerable group and wonder and consider and estimate if it's now okay to bring that section of the society back out into the world to live a more normal life, because more than half of our society will have developed antibodies and their own immunity naturally without a vaccine, in precisely the same way that the human race has done for thousands of years over countless pandemics and plagues. I don't know if people are aware that there were plagues in Roman times, more than one, in the Middle Ages, also in the Victorian period, in the 1800s, to a couple of plagues then. And of course, in the last 100 years, there have been some that are more well-known, Spanish flu. And throughout those thousands of years, we, the human race, have managed to get through all of them without a vaccine. And it's true, along the way, there are people who, most sadly, have passed and succumbed. And we say our prayers, we grieve for the loss, but we always have done, move on and remember them and live our lives normally thereafter without a vaccine. The other number that's important is that the survivors are a much bigger number than those who've passed away. Today, planet Earth has 7 billion, that's 7,000 million people. We're survivors. And the survivors are dwarfing and have done through all previous pandemics, the number of people who passed away. So I think that our natural immune system, the human race's natural immune system, is one of the natural wonders of the world. And we need to have faith in it. We need to trust it, let it do its job. I use another analogy. It's like your mental arithmetic. If you use a calculator all the time, technology, instead of your brain, your mental arithmetic will go rusty. If you use a device like a crane to do your heavy lifting instead of your muscles will waste away. If you don't use your second language, that will waste away. So it goes with the human body, and our immune system needs the workout that it gets to stay sharp and on top of things. And if we keep turning to technology all the time, and there's a fashion for that at the moment, we are going to put our immune systems into a state of disuse, and they will be they'll get rusty, and we end up ever more dependent on vaccinations. And I'm inventing a word here. I think I might be the first to say it, so this is the place I'm going to say it. I don't want to live in a vaxtatorship, play on the word dictatorship. So I'm not against vaccines, I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but I'm also not in favor of a vaxtatorship. And there are those out there who are.
I think there's certain people in the communities, they do need vaccines. Obviously, you have the flu vaccines for the elderly and having those antibodies. But I think one of that, just because of time moving on, the last topic I want to ask you about is, what do you think about the sort of US election? Would you be happy to talk about that, Doctor?
So I'm not up to date at the moment, to be honest with you. I'm happy to talk about it. I feel that the woke culture, for me, is it's transformed several times in its short existence, and it's a problem. It's weaved its way deeply into American politics. It finds its voice through large swathes of the Democratic Party. In fact, I'd say it's hijacked the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is not what it used to be. I know a lot of people who were Democratic Party supporters, and I've always considered them previous decades to be very decent and reasonable people, and I've not begrudged their support for the Democratic Party at all. And in fact, I'll put my hand up and say that in previous decades I've been inclined toward the Democratic Party, but that's a long time ago. In the recent decade, they've lost their way very much, and I feel very concerned about some of the tactics and strategies that they are using, all being driven by a culture and an approach to life that is summed up in this one short word, woke. And I know that the word woke was first used in a song by a singer from the black community, and on that occasion, in that song, the meaning that the word had is a very precise thing. But the woke word has been taken and used and applied to so many other aspects of culture. It's moved on a lot, and today, what the word woke represents is not something I can support. And it concerns me very much that the Democratic Party is essentially a platform and a voice piece for wokeism, which is a toxic and divisive culture, and it's not something that leads to a happy future as far as I can see.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that past years with the Democratic Party, there were certain values that they shared with the Republican Party. They were both pro-American. They both thought that America was inherently a good country. They believed in some sort of, they both believed in some sort of free market economics. Yes, okay, the Democrats wanted slightly higher taxes and a bit of a softer side to capitalism, but that's fine. They were both obviously very pro-American in terms of foreign policy, very pro-defense, and that type of, go back to JFK and that type of thing. Whereas I think now what you're seeing is a split in the Democrat Party. You call it split, or you can call it infiltration of a hell of a lot of anti-Americanism coming in, anti-American people coming in, people that don't truly believe in the Constitution of America, don't believe in the foundings of America, in the foundings of liberty and happiness and prosperity for all. They don't believe in any of that. They believe that actually there's a hell of a lot now in the Democratic Party that they believe that people from Europe went to America, and that was the problem. They believe that America was founded on things like slavery, which is not true. And they almost think that because America in its past did things that America regrets now, slavery was a good example, they think that that is the foundations of the country of America. And I think now you're finding with the Democratic Party, I think Joe Biden is almost the last, I don't want to say sensible Democrat, but the last moderate sort of Democrat that you're seeing. The problem is that I don't think Joe Biden's going to last he's definitely not going to last 8 years. And the woman behind him, Kamala Harris, is a bit nutty, really. There's no other way to say it. Is your classic woke, liberal, anti-American, anti-British, anti sort of freedom-loving, valuing countries, and then after that you've got Ilhan Omar, and you've got AOC, and these new people that come in the Democratic Party, which is just not what the Democratic Party were founded on, and what they haven't been in the last 60 years.
Well, as I say, you described the fact that the Democratic Party has been hijacked. It's essentially, the way I analyze things is the left-wing parties, whether it's the Democratic Party in the US or the Labour Party here, lost touch with their working class base, and felt that they needed to embrace other sections of society that see themselves as underdog, and they decided to be the brand for the underdog, and they rounded up all the sections of society that feel like they're oppressed, in whether they are or not, and there may be some legitimate oppression going on, but they rounded them all up and said, "We are your party," and that's quite a mixed bag of different groups, with this one thing in common: this sentiment that they're all feeling like they're victims of something, and they clubbed together and effectively ganged up. And that's what's playing out right now, as far as I analyze things. And it's a most unhealthy concoction. It encourages a victimhood mindset, which is core to wokeness, and it's an extremely toxic cocktail. Most unhealthy to encourage any human being to see themselves as a victim. It's something that I feel is counterproductive, unhealthy, and lacking in spirit. Now, that's not to say that there are no victims out there. There are plenty of victims in the world. And I, as a care provider, I trained as a doctor because I'm a caring person, recognize that when there are victims, we have to identify them and give them our love. Having said that, you don't want to exaggerate a victimhood culture approach to life in humanity. That's an extremely unhealthy approach to life. And here you've got a whole party in a large democracy that is representing exactly that set of values. And it's tragic that it's come to this. It's and we have to pull away from it. But it's divisive. It's toxic. Really not good. And Joe Biden, I'm lost for words. He's go on.
On that note, Doctor, we are running out of time. So I was going to say, before we say goodbye to you, is there anything you'd like to say to our audience before you go?
Well, thank you very much for having me on your show. I have, I'll leave you with a teaser. I've got some announcements which I'll be making in the next few weeks. I am hoping that our government, our Western governments collectively, stop a woke, fear-mongering attitude towards COVID, embrace the human immune system, the natural immune system, give it its best shot. Don't just talk about vaccines all the time. And we need to all pull back from wokeism. There are a lot of people out there. This is the message I really want to put out. There are a lot of people out there who actually think and feel as many people watching now do. They are feeling silenced to speak their mind, frightened for being judged. And that judginess comes out of a political correctness, which is rooted in a victimhood culture that is what wokeism has become. And the Democratic Party and the Labour Party are the vehicle for it. And I strongly encourage everybody to identify those people who don't really buy into wokeism, but they're a bit frightened to speak out against it, and give those people permission to speak their mind. Help them come out of their shells, because they are already on our side in their hearts. They just don't feel able to voice it. That with them on board, we are easily the majority. That's what I'll leave you with.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for coming on tonight. And everyone, that was Dr. Parag Shah.
Thank you very much for having me. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so again, Dr. Parag Shah on Turning Point UK. As he said, he's got some announcements coming up over the next couple of weeks. So when you see him, he's going to be big. And remember, you saw him here on Turning Point UK first. But without further ado, I believe our time's nearly up. There's a few things I want to leave you with. We've launched a new crowdfunder for Turning Point UK to help boost our new news team. So that's where we go on the streets and we interview members of the public. So we want to set that up to bring you the real news and opinions of the British people and have an alternative source of information than the BBC, ITV, Channel 4. So for that to happen, though, we need your help. So we're going to do it to the best of our ability at the moment. But if you want to see that become a regular show, have regular feedback on the streets, maybe yourself, and you can suggest to us which area, please do check out that fundraiser. And if you enjoyed the broadcast, please share it in groups. So I know everyone's here going to be members of 10s or 20 conservative groups. Please share this broadcast in some of them so we can get more people on next week. We can reach more people, and it is an interactive broadcast. So we do read your comments as they're going on there, even some of the more inappropriate ones. But yeah, thank you everyone for watching tonight. Oscar, would you like to say anything?
No, what I'll say is I don't know when the next one is, but I think we'll come time.
So the next show we've got is on Thursday. So we've got a new co-host joining us, but we'll announce that on Wednesday. But yeah, make sure you tune in Thursday because it's going to be a slightly different setup, but I think you'll enjoy it.
Tune in Thursday and bring another friend along.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for tuning in.